Hi everyone and welcome to my channel and to this short video where I'm going to talk about analysing colour and in particular colour temperature. I'm going to use the colour green to show you some demos today that I hope will make colour temperature more clear. I hope that you enjoy this. And if you do, then please do check out some of my other videos here on YouTube where I talk about other elements of colour theory. If you find it helpful, then I would really appreciate if you would hit the subscribe button here on YouTube and also consider checking me out over on my Patreon channel where you'll get access to my full catalogue of real-time tutorials and lots more helpful instruction in the world of soft pastel. So for today's demo, I decided to use just the colour green because I've always found it quite tricky to work with. And perhaps that's because there are just so many shades of green. And being from Ireland, where they say there are 40 shades of green in any landscape, I think that's very true. And I'm pretty sure I've got way more than 40 shades of green in my collection. So today I'm going to talk about colour temperature in particular, so not colour value. When we talk about colour value, what we're referring to is how light or dark the colour is. So can you see here in my trays that I've organised the colours roughly from light through to dark in each case. But that's not what I want to talk about today because colour value is a little bit easier to analyse than colour temperature, and today I want to give you some tips on temperature. So with my trays of green, I have roughly split it into warm and cool. So in this tray, I've got all of my lighter through to mid-tone greens, which are warm. And in this tray, I've got my light through to mid-tone greens, which are cool. I seem to have more of the light colours of green than I do of the dark. So I've only got one tray of dark colours. And in there I've organised it roughly from light to dark, but also from warmer greens through to the cooler greens at the bottom end. And that's just how I like to keep my greens organised, so that when I'm painting I can easily find the right temperature that I'm looking for. But what do I actually mean when I'm describing a colour as either warm or cool? You might have noticed when you actually go to organise your own pastels into some kind of order that it's difficult because the lines between the different colours start to blur the closer one colour gets to another colour. And colour, it's true, it's totally relative. So something can look entirely different when you place it next to another colour. The relationships between colours really change how we view them. So what am I actually thinking of when I decide how warm or cool a colour is? Well, I've always got in my mind those colours of the spectrum that we're familiar with from the rainbow colours: red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet. And if you think about that, it really brings you from warm right across the spectrum to the cool colours. And because it's a circular thing, it kind of loops back around after indigo. It goes back into red from there. So it's circular rather than linear. But in this case, we're just trying to think of the warm end of the spectrum and the cool end of the spectrum. So for example, this tray, which I've described as my warm tray of greens, this is closer in relationship to my tray of yellow colours. In fact, some of my yellows are pretty close in value to some of these greens. There's really very little between them. And my cool tray of greens is closer in relationship to my tray of blues. And I think that it's easier to distinguish which of these two trays is warm and cool. So I'm going to do a quick mixing demonstration now because I think it will show you better how I am looking at my colours and analysing what's actually in them. Half the time when we paint in pastel, we don't really think about mixing our colours the way you would with other mediums such as oil painting or acrylics or watercolour, any of those wet paints where you've got to actually mix your colour before you start. They make you think about colour a lot more, and I think that even when you paint in pastel, you should have a good knowledge of how to mix together colours, because that's going to help you analyse them much easier. So it's easy to think that if you don't have certain colours in pastel, then you're going to be really stuck when you need a certain colour in a painting. But I'm going to show you now how you can create some of those in-between shades that you don't have in pastel sticks just from mixing what you do have together. So first, let's choose a colour that's a little bit more obscure, something that you might not have in your collection to get started. What about one of these? I love these warm, really mossy greens, but you might not have this initially in your collection. So how can I make this from some other colours that I do have? First thing, I'll choose a green that's of a similar tonal value. So if I were to grayscale both of these, it should be roughly the same amount of light and dark. So let's put this green down first. So that's a world away from this green which I want to create. So how can I make this more like this? Well, first thing I'm seeing in this green is a lot more yellow, so I'm going to add yellow over the top first of all. And I'm also seeing a lot more red in this green, so I'm going to take a bright red and also add that over the top. And once you really start to mix those together, it should start to come out a little bit more similar to the green that we're looking for. So it may not be exact, but it's certainly made this green, which is a world away from it, a lot more like this green. So I know that if I needed a really warm green and all I had was this, I could add these extra warm colours, yellow and red, to bring this closer to the warmth that I'm looking for. And similarly, let's try a cool colour. So if I needed a lighter minty green like this, well, I would choose, if I happen to have a more yellowy green like this in a similar tonal value again. And then it's clear to me that I need to add blue to this one to make it more like this. And just like you would if you're mixing paint, play about with this and mix colours together, experiment with your colours and see what happens when you mix colours together, as it's really going to help improve your eye at analysing colours while you paint. So that's pretty close. It's certainly brought this colour much closer to the minty green that I was looking for. So let's have a look at a dark colour now as well. Say I'm wanting to create this colour. So this is one of my darker blue greens. So let's say I've only got the more yellow greens in the end of the spectrum. So how can I change this into this? Well, I'm going to take a deeper blue and just mix that in. So yeah, really experiment with this. Maybe you'll add too much blue and you'll have to bring it back a little bit with the green. But that's just what happens when you're actually mixing paint, and it's very similar process with soft pastel. But just look at those new colors that you can create when you didn't have them. All you had in this first instance, for example, were 3 really bright, almost primary colors, these two, and a really bright yellowy green to begin with, and we've managed to get something pretty close to this. So even if you don't have a huge collection of pastels, you can do a lot with mixing color to create extra shades when you need them. But the main thing that I hope that this demonstrates is just what I mean when I'm saying that a green has either more blue in it or more yellow or red in it, and that's how I'm deciding whether a color is warm or cool. So what relevance does all of that actually have when you're painting something? How can you actually put that into use in practical terms? So I'm gonna use a recent painting here just to show you quickly. I had to create a lot of different greens in this background. You can see that there are quite a few shadows being cast in the painting, and each section of the green areas seems to have a different temperature. So in general, I'm usually thinking of shadows as being quite cool and those sunlit areas as being warm. So these are the actual greens that I used in this painting, and this should show you the difference between my sunlit areas and my areas that were in shadow. So just what we've been talking about, I've got a range of greens that are in the warm category, and I've got a range of tonal values going from light right through to dark. And then because my shadow areas were quite dark, I don't have as big a tonal range in this section, but I do have lovely rich dark greens with a lot more blue in them. So in its most basic sense, I've chosen greens that are warm for the sunlight and greens that are cool for the shadows. And that is one of the main ways that I analyse my colours as I'm working. I'm really looking for areas that are warm and cool and both light and dark. And if you can master both of those, then you are well on your way to perfect colour values in your paintings. And I hope that this video also shows you that you don't necessarily need a huge range of pastels to get you started. Sometimes, like I did at the beginning, I didn't have very many pastels to work with as my budget just didn't allow for it. And I've collected more and more over the years, so don't be put off soft pastel just because you can't afford a huge colour range to get you started. If anything, having to play with your colours and mix colours together to create those in-between shades is really going to teach you a lot in the beginning that you will be able to carry forward in your pastel journey. So I really hope that that starts to shed a little bit of light on what is a tricky subject. But for me, when colour really started to click and I really started to see it more clearly, that's really when my journey in art felt like it sparked into action. And I love the fact that my videos can help some of you guys along on that path. So if you have enjoyed this, then do go and check out some of my other playlists here on YouTube. I have one entire playlist devoted to colour if you want to learn more about this. But if you can, then do consider checking me out on my Patreon channel as well. That's where you'll gain access to all of my real-time and in-depth tutorials, as well as gaining access to a wonderful growing community of artists, all on different stages of their own art journeys. I'll add links to all of that in my description below. But thank you very much for watching, and until next time, happy pasteling.